I'd like to acknowledge Australia's First Nation people as the traditional custodians of the land, and for this episode in particular, the Gunai people. I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging.
I've been told that, young people aren't into wine my entire career. Young people are into wine. They're just engaging with it differently. And isn't that fantastic?
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale.
Today, we have our first ever returning guest on Over a Glass, the charismatic Dan Sims. Now wearing a brand new hat as Chair of Wine Victoria, Dan joins us with something we don't hear often enough, a good news story. Dan the man, how are you?
Oh, it's so great to be back. I can't believe I'm the first returning guest. How is that even a thing?
I know. Well, there's so many wonderful stories out there. And so it has to be someone really special if we're going to revisit them. And you are a man of many hats. Now, if the Wine Victoria hat was an actual hat, what kind of hat would it be?
Oh, an actual hat. I think it's, I call myself the cheerleader of Victorian wine. So I chair the board at Wine Victoria, along with the team as well. This is all with our CEO, Stephanie Duberton. So Wine Victoria is an advocacy body for the Victorian wine industry or community, so to speak. So we work very closely with government with a number of different programs. Of course, we deal with all the advisory bodies and our regulatory bodies, both domestically and, of course, nationally as well. But yeah, we're just here to celebrate and champion the best of what Victoria has to offer.
I love that. So I don't know how you got involved in this mix. Just kidding. But okay, so you're a cheerleader, so you probably have one of those little side caps and then you've got the pom-poms for sure. But I want to pick up where we left off because you've had quite a few big life changes. As per usual, you haven't slowed down at all, even though you said you were going to. So tell us and kind of catch us up from where we left off. So you were kind of finishing up with Revel. So tell me a little bit about the decision to do that and then how you've found your way since then.
Yeah, totally. I think running Revel and events and festivals, so like Pinot Palooza and Mull Cheese Festival, which was so epic. And towards the end of 2024, it was took the decision to kind of step away from all of that. I had this running joke when I say to events like, come on guys, no one cares you're tired. Like we've just got to turn up and give a really good show, but I was tired, and it was time to step back. And again, it's like anything. It was time for it to take its next evolution, and I felt that it was really in great, capable hands. That it was, and also with the events getting back to the size and scale of what they once were, sort of BC before COVID. So to be able to navigate the business through. Mass gathering business through COVID to where it was fantastic. And having Jess Ortis, who's now running those events, I mean, she's an absolute legend. And funny enough, when she started working with me a couple of years before I stepped away, we had this sort of very funny interview. It wasn't really an interview; it was more a bit of a catch up where a person said, "Oh, Dan, Jess, where do you see yourself in 2 or 3 years' time?" And she said, "I'm taking Dan's job." And I was like, "Great, awesome." It's all yours, Jess. So she's doing amazing, and the brands keep growing and evolving. I think that's a really exciting thing. It was just time for me to sort of step back and take a bit of a break and look at what the next challenge would be. And from there, I had 6 months off, and then managed to break my leg in the first month, doing some very silly things on the farm, and that forced me to slow down a little bit. And then since then I sort of joined the Common State team. It's a PR communications agency, part of Bolster Group. Now they did a lot of the PR for Revel events, and I came on board as head of special projects, which is a wonderfully nebulous title. It feels like very, very, very on brand for me, isn't it? It's like, what does Dan do? Stuff. So running an event in Gippsland. Called Eat, Drink, Play. We ran that in conjunction with Rhett and Aidan McLaren down here in Gippsland, who Hills Are Alive group. And then a couple of other things coming up in the future, which we might chat about a bit later. So, yes.
Part 3 incoming.
Indeed. But, of course, spending a lot of time on the Wine Victoria role as well.
Amazing. So tell me a little bit now. I'm going to ask the questions pretending that I don't know anything, but the truth is I don't know anything. So I will ask the questions. Tell me a little bit about your role with WineVic, and then tell me a little bit about these numbers that have come in with the 2025 WineVic Industry Economic Scorecard. Explain that a little bit to me. And then again, just, chair of WineVic. What does that mean?
Well, again, so I'm chair of the board. So we're a volunteer board. I'm a volunteer chair. And with the day-to-day operations run by Stephanie Duberton and also Halani. And then, of course, we've got Hayley Perbrick, who leads our Innovation and Sustainability League. We're actually quite a small organisation in comparison to a lot of other state-based organisations, with our operating budget barely being a quarter of what some other South Australian regions have. So we do a lot with a little. And so I've been on the board for about 5 years. I've been chair for just over 3. And really, for me, it was wanting to, that idea of giving back and getting involved. And I keep saying, be the change that we want to see. There's certainly a lot of challenge, in our sector, and it was an opportunity to step up and play an active role. And what we've been doing over the last 3 years, we've had a lot of fantastic programs with our domestic program as well as the export program. And what we got recently was the economic snapshot, and it's actually some positive news. And I know that sounds very weird saying that in what has been almost like a bingo card of challenges for a growing season, across the country, and particularly in Victoria. There've been, unprecedented frosts, there's been hailstorms, there's horrific bushfires. Michael Dillon posted a lightning strike of a tree on fire, and then there was floods in Mildura, floods in a desert. So it's sort of, I'm very aware of saying that, hey, here's some good news. Yeah, right. But what it did say was there's a shift, we can say, that there is some positive news coming through, where those headwinds that feel like so much we've been facing, that we're starting to get a little bit of the tailwinds. And in particular with the economic impacts kicking over $10.8 billion throughout the sector is incredibly significant, with domestic sales increasing 54% over an additional $220 million. Exports are up 80%. That's, almost well over sort of $200 million. So take on those sort of elements, you look at it and go, actually, this is something that we can really be grateful for and celebrate. And that's testament to a lot of the hard work that's been done throughout the entire Victorian wine community. But also, again, there is still more work to be done. However, we can start to see that there's some light at the end of the tunnel. Really.
Good. And I mean, so often in this game, we do focus on some of those harder stories to draw attention, especially in a podcast like this, where we really want to just let people know how to support and what's going on. But we don't often talk about the positives enough to give people hope that there is change happening. And I mean, I've always said to myself, if there's nothing you can count on in this world more than change, everything is going to change and it's going to ebb and flow. But explain to me a little bit, is it just export that we're mainly seeing some of this fueling this kind of upturn? Is it that export taking off, or are there's lots? I mean, I imagine there's lots of different components.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And the easy one is yes, okay, Dan, well, China's reopened and that's a certainly significant kick. And that's something we looked at as well. Yes, that has impact. But we're also seeing it's not just China. There's growth in other export markets. And export, again, in Victoria, I mean, we're the home of the small boutique wine producer. There's, 21 regional communities that we help represent. So a lot of the producers don't necessarily do export. But what I found really exciting about this economic scorecard was seeing the growth in domestic consumption. And that's really important. So that says we've got this this two-speed economy. We've got people who export, but also domestic in working in tandem, which is really important. So I think that has so much to do with, and look, if anything, it celebrates and champions and highlights the power of collaboration. So if you look at domestic consumption, we're working very closely with Agriculture Victoria with programs like Drink Victorian, that's been going on for 4 years, which is an alliance between the Spirits Victoria, Cider Australia, independent brewers, working with Food and Wine Victoria, putting a big trade celebration every year and to do programs around that. And that has certainly had an impact. You've also seen growth in other areas like if you look at again, as a data nerd, I've been doing lots of reading. Clearly, is you've got the State of Grapes report, which was done by Wine Australia and Endeavour Brands, looking at the shift and trends in spirits culture, innovation, packaging, that type of thing. So you're fueling a lot of riding the tailwinds of that. And then, of course, then you've got the export, which we've been running a really robust and strategic export program targeting and helping support Victorian wineries to get into various markets, in particular, whether it be China or Singapore or, the US, and now it's in Canada, where it's really about getting Victorian wines out there. And as a result of that, we've managed to create quite a large noise and press and coverage globally, that you have to say that a lot of the tourism increase in tourism dollars and visitor nights, we're seeing a big kick of international tourists coming into Victoria and heading out to these wineries. So it starts to see this element of all things working together, and particularly, again, that collaboration where you've got working with the regional bodies, working with Global Victoria, working with Wine Australia for all of these other programs. That it's if anything, it's a highlight of this is what happens when we work together positively and collaboratively that gets a really good result. And that's something that, we should celebrate.
Definitely. And we are so intermixed. We've got this wonderful cobweb of everybody in different touchstones. But again, it feels still like quite a small community in the world of wine. But I do have a question for you in regards to China. So as somebody that hasn't been over there talking, I have been over there, but not necessarily in the same role that you have. I'm curious to see what the reception was for somewhere like Victoria, because as we know, there's a huge desire for red wine and in particular South Australia. What was the experience like when you went over to China? Do they thirst for those cool climate styles, or do we need to be doing more communication with where the hell you are and all the different styles that Victoria make?
Well, a bit of everything, really. But what really did surprise us, and I was over there 18 months ago, and we did a fantastic collaborative event with 67 Pall Mall in Shanghai as part of CWIE, which is a big import expo over there with Global Vic. And we were walking around the room, and Scott Burton, who leads the export program at Wine Victoria, we were asking a lot of producers, what were the first two wines that you poured out of? Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And that would, going back, say, 5 years ago, that would have been slightly different. It would have been very much sort of Shiraz and Cabernet. And China is a fascinating market, and I think there tends to be so much noise happening around it, going, oh, what about this and this? And it becomes this very binary, it's one thing or the other. It's not. China is a fascinating, high-speed, very evolved market. And what our experience over there was people looking towards light to medium-bodied styles, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in particular, which is great. That plays straight to our wheelhouse. But also in terms of the shifting changes of the Chinese wine drinker consumer, for those who want me to say that word, which I know I hate saying that word, consumer, but it's about who they are and how they're interacting with it. Like we caught up with some key opinion leaders, KOLs for lovely and acronym, or influencers, which I don't think that's a fair enough word to describe them, because they're all Western trained. They're incredible communicators.
Yeah, it kind of diminishes them, doesn't it? So
it does, and it's not. It's not that. And we're talking with them, going, "Oh, where do you buy wine? Do you buy wine in a retail store?" And they're like, "No, my father does that, and I buy it online." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" It's just like, well, I can get a bottle of wine in a restaurant in like 13 minutes. And it was incredible how they communicate and talk about it, and do all these live streaming, and they're curious. And I think the one big takeaway for me, which I think really was an insight, that you can only get once you're actually in market, and you can do as much research and do all these readings, but until you're actually there and listening and hearing it, was that there is a big opportunity over there. And I think in Victoria we're quite lucky because we've got a really phenomenal Chinese student community here, in Victoria, in particular Melbourne. And when we were speaking with these Chinese drinkers and influencers, they're like, I went to school in Melbourne. So they were already semi-familiar with the grape varieties that we grow here, and they've taken that back home. And so there will be a bit of a shift, and it is still a very challenging market, absolutely. And it does take time, and it's very large and all those elements, but it's a positive shift that you're starting to see. It's not about a move away from one particular style, but it's a diversification of their wine drinking habits. And again, which goes into a global perspective, really, isn't it? About moving towards light to medium bodied styles, which is a global trend, and moving away from, rather say singular dimensional bulk, mass produced wine to wines with more story and character. Isn't it? I think that's an amazing thing. It's super exciting.
It is. And that's affecting every state, whether it be that they're looking at more drought-resistant varieties that hold on to their acidity more. So that style change is affecting not just the regions like Victoria, it's affecting everywhere. Everybody's thinking, can we have less alcohol? Can we make this more palatable every day? So we're seeing that change, I think, around Australia. But I'd like to know, because employment, some of those numbers were 17,000 supporting jobs in employment within the sector. Where's the biggest kind of job creation happening, and where do we need to put a little bit more effort into?
Yeah, well, again, it's a great question. I mean, we've got direct jobs and indirect jobs. So the indirect is around that 17,000, direct jobs around 12, just over 12,000 jobs. So really what we're seeing there is across the full spectrum of the supply chain, from whether it be production or directly impact, so through wineries and growers, vineyard workers, of that, and then all the other side of that is all the ancillary elements like tourism. And we started to see some of that growth through a lot of those tourism operators, in particular some areas like Monte Peninsula. It's got a big boost in terms of economic contribution. We're also seeing that growth in Geelong as well as King Valley and all those other areas that you're starting to see that sort of spread across. Regionally, in terms of jobs, it's quite relatively, it's reflective of the size and scale of the industry within that region. But again, it's a diversification. I think if anything, it's about empowering regional communities more and getting people back out to those regional areas. It's obvious it has an absolute an immediate and economic impact, from to all these regional communities. That's the big thing. We need more people out to regions, means more jobs, which means more profitability for businesses, which means more sustainable Victorian wine community. It sounds. I sound like a politician now, don't I?
You kind of do it quite well.
I just heard myself. I was like, oh my God, who is this guy, Dan? What is he doing?
I'm impressed. I think it's interesting because I was speaking to Christina from 67 Pall Mall. I think her role is wine development manager in Melbourne. And she was talking about the Singapore sommeliers and their lack of ability to get out to wine regions in general. And she said, here in Australia, we'll whinge a little bit about the fact we don't get to go to Europe. They don't get to go to any wine regions. And I think that, like you said, getting people out and getting them to region. There's one thing to come to a tourist city or a coast where everything is, but to get out to a real wine region where, you're seeing the grapes, you're seeing the aspect, you're seeing the soils, and this incredible hospitality that we provide is a whole different ballgame of experience. So I think that when we talk to these regional bodies and we're thinking, how do we get people and draw them out there? Where does that, how do we encourage more funding to make that happen? It can't always come down to the wineries to put that forward either, can it?
No, I think that's the thing is like we've been very lucky in Victoria to have great support with Global Victoria and Agriculture Victoria to be able to run programs like that through whether it be Export or the Drink Victorian program. And you're so right, like you're going to markets like Singapore, which we're over there for Vinexpo as well, and doing some trade events over there, engaging with trade, a bit more fun type of events, and partnering with Pall Mall, 67 Pall Mall over there as well. But again, that and we've had inbound trips as well from a lot of buyers from the US and also China and other markets in Southeast Asia. But again, Southeast Asia is really, it's our backyard. You know, we should be engaging with these a lot more, not from a Victorian point of view, but an Australian wine point of view, because it's a lot closer and easier to service, in market. And I think that's the next step really is, what we're looking when working closely with government on is, okay, right, this is what we've done so far. Now we've got Victorian wineries into market. Now we need to drive awareness to take it to that next step, to continue that next generation and continue keeping Victorian wine front of mind. And the best way to do that is not just visit market, but again, as you said, the opportunity to bring people here, that exchange of ideas, and or leveraging partnerships like 67 Pall Mall. It's anything to get the attention and spark the curiosity of wine lovers across the world for Victoria. I'm all about.
Yeah, there's those pom-poms. Woo-woo. I'm going to have to teach you like a little dance routine or something you can pull out, I think. On that note, I mean, just talking about tourism operators and thinking about, how important is food and drink for encouraging people to travel? I mean, that food and drink go hand in hand, whether it be spirits, whether it be non-alcs, whether it be wine. That is in itself this wonderful marriage. But when people are deciding to travel, how important do you think food and drink is in getting them places?
Oh, it's everything, right? Like, I mean, we go to, yes, wine may be a driver to get that person to that region, but they don't just go to a winery. They'll go to a restaurant, they'll go to a brewer, they'll go to a distiller, they'll go to a cheesemaker, all of the other elements that are there. And, food and wine, it does go hand in hand. But also I think, sometimes we get so caught up in it where, this thing goes with that. And, your time at, key and the importance of food and wine matching in that setting. But again, I think that's sort of evolving and changing quite a lot. And one thing that we did recently, which was just so much fun, was working with a lot of local Chinese KOLs, influencers, where I got to host them, and we went out to local Chinese restaurants, and I just bought a bunch of Victorian wine and put it on the table and go, you tell me what works. Like, I think so often when we talk about or any wine, or we're putting it through the lens of our own experience, whereas when we're having people from Southeast Asia, it's or wherever, it's like how do you interact? How does this work with your food or cuisine? And not us telling you this goes with this when we've got absolutely no idea or no experience through that. And I think that's the fun bit. And I loved it. I learned so much about Chinese cuisine. It was awesome, but also to hear their perspective of what works when, where, and what dishes go in what order. We were doing hot pot, and I was like, do we do the fish and then the meat? Because that's what my Western brain tells me. But no, we don't. We do the meat first and then we do the fish, because the fish is the stronger flavour and that sort of builds in the broth. And I was like, this is cool. Like, so how do you then marry this play? And it becomes this, there's wines on the table, it's social, taste this, taste that, move it around, white then red or red then white. But just explore and taste. I think that's the fun bit about it. I think, and I think it comes back to anything, right, Shanteh? It's like, if anything, if we can spark curiosity in wine drinkers, then great. Like, that's the big thing, because if you're curious, then you're open to explore, whether it be from Victoria or, only Victorian wine, absolutely, of course, but or from the greater world. Like, if you've got a curiosity about it, then you're halfway there.
Totally. I mean, I would love to just do a whole series of chats around this, around culture and wine and whether it fits. I want to know about, like you said, especially something like Chinese cuisine, which is so much about texture and so much about deeper umami characters that we probably don't talk enough about in our own culture. But then you think of a different culture or, Jewish traditions, and I want to know about what makes sense there. So I just think we don't do enough of talking about wine and different cultures. We kind of put it into this, like you said, this Western mindset that it means status and that you drink it out of fine crystal. But I would love to hear more about how people enjoy wine in all different senses and how we can open that conversation more.
Totally. And again, from our experience of going over to China and doing this local program, was so great and fascinating to listen. And I think, but also that's probably a statement on the greater world of wine, right? Of we have this very Western way, through education or whether through WSET or, quartermaster sommeliers. It's done in a very, here are the classics, and this flavour description is how you describe this character. So we're educating, drinkers to speak in this way that is not necessarily relevant to their day to day. So what I loved when we were chatting with them, going, well, how do you describe it? And they were telling me, this reminds me of this fruit that I've had, whether it be in China or some parts. And I was like, I can't remember the name of it, but I was like, that's their olfactory memory. And who's to say that that's, in a say a formal program, they might say, well, that's wrong. So, well, who's to say that that is wrong? That's their experience. So I think, as we look into other markets, there's certainly a lot of lessons there. In particular with China, that like it's so evolved. Like it's a fascinating market, and they can, embrace these styles and characters at super speed. It's like watching the evolution of a wine drinking culture just happen, on fast forward. Because traditionally, if you're first learning out to wine, you big bold flavors, and then as you evolve in your education, you tend to go towards light to medium body. It's just that China's doing it in 4-speed, 5-speed.
Definitely, like everything that they're doing. Yeah. So tell me a little bit, I mean, when we think domestically about what's kind of changing, when I hang around winemakers or producers or viticulturists, or whenever you're at a wine show with a lot of people in the same kind of industry, they're so curious. So when they're in, WA and they make wine in SA, you can see the curiosity of, I want to drink this and this and this. So we know that in a small group of people, we want to drink everything from around Australia. What are we seeing for the consumers that are up and coming, and what are some of the trends that we're seeing that is going to be a focus that we can really kind of knuckle into to see that domestic consumption is kind of spread out?
Yeah, fun.
Good.
Like I know that sounds quite flippant, but fun. But having wine that are really good everyday drinking wines that are really deliver on really great quality. And if you look at again those trends of people moving away from probably more large, high volume, mass produced sort of. It's probably not fair to say of a particular sort of style or brand of wine. The people are moving away from that because they're looking for more. Wines of story, and like I believe we can what we do in Australia or in particularly in Victoria. Like I look at a region like the Murray-Darling, which I love. I really believe in that can be the wine bowl of Australia, where we can produce really fantastic quality wines that are for everyday drinking, that deliver on a price point that that are well made, because we're not sort of competing, say, with other countries where we pay. Where growers should be paid a proper price and farmers should be paid proper wages, that we can deliver. It's not about a race to the bottom of discount or $1 a litre type thing. It's about how do we then shift to get to that point where it's really exciting everyday drinking. But also we can, embrace how wine drinkers are drinking today. And, we look at spritz culture. Zoncello is just still a phenomenon. You look at all the innovation that Brown Brothers are doing, and that's driving growth in a region out there in terms of that whole spirits culture, which is getting people engaged with wine as an entry level for them to then further explore the greater world of wine. No and low. It's sometimes in wine we get so binary on things. It's like it's either one thing or the other. Like, oh, we can't call it wine if it doesn't have alcohol in it. Well, if you look at beer, I mean, I just watched the Grand Prix. There's like Heineken Zero and Peroni Zero everywhere. These big brands going for low alcohol. Now, low alcohol wine or zero alcohol wine is still a bit of a challenge. It's not necessarily a replacement, but again, I'm trying to say this without trying to sound like evangelist, as I tend to do on alternate packaging, is that people want to drink less more often, but we currently don't. We're still selling them a 750 ml bottle that goes off in the fridge in 2 or 3 days. If wine was invented today, there's no way it would be only be in a 750 ml bottle. It would be in different packaging. So I think it's like leading into that occasion-based. How do we insert wine into those occasions to how people are living today?
Which is so diverse. And
which is so
changing
diverse.
And
Actually, I saw this. I read this stat. Sorry, I was like, and it's so interesting because we talk about, declining consumption, and it's the health lobby and it's all this and all that. I read this. This poll came out of the US, and it talks about the number of occasions that we've had over the last 10, 15 years has declined significantly, and it's those occasions, lack of occasions, that are the biggest factor for the declining consumption of alcohol. And if you go back over the last 10 years, you look at the hyper increase of social media, throw in a global pandemic, throw in streaming services over the top of that, working from home, and then all of a sudden you're starting to see that, that those occasions or social occasions have dropped almost by half. And so it's almost like 2.1. This is data from the US of having social occasions. So that's the biggest shift or probably the biggest impact of declining consumption. So it's like, well, how do we then insert wine into those occasions when people are at home watching something at home that they want to moderate their consumption, and we're selling them a 750 ml bottle of wine?
That's fascinating, isn't it? Because you do think that's the first to go when, the economy is looking shaky. The first thing to go is, do I want to have a big 40th? I don't know if I want to do that. Or do I, it's our wedding anniversary, but maybe we could just take it down a notch, so I think you're right that kind of, I need to kind of put that money away for a rainy day. Maybe we don't do that. And at the same time, I don't think you want people to say, hey, it's a Wednesday, get sloshed, just celebrate the everyday either. But I thought that, my family was off to a funeral recently and just thought, gosh, it's really the people that decide to have a big wedding, which is few and far between as well. Not only do we have lab diamonds that, people are saving less for, then I think the weddings are going to be one of the first things to go as well. This opulence. And then it's kind of come down to funeral, which is pretty depressing. And you're right. So when do we make an everyday special, or when do we kind of decide to have some people round and open that bottle together? I believe in having something to look forward to always. So I hope that that's not the case, but it is a really interesting fact in what you're talking about in that kind of consumption being down. Interesting.
And that's 100% right. So wine by default is social. You open a bottle of wine and you share it. That's part of the joy and the beauty of why we get so insanely obsessed by this product, because it is by default social. So, but that's also, but again, how people generally purchase it is by generally price and occasion. They have been doing that. So it's like, how do we then be okay with talking about that? And again, it's like, it's not to say, oh, that's going to be the death of this or the death of that, or millennials or zillennials have ruined wine forever. I mean, these narratives get thrown around. I recently celebrated the 10th anniversary of my 40th birthday, and I've been told that young people aren't into wine my entire career. Young people are into wine. They're just engaging with it differently, and isn't that fantastic?
Yeah. Absolutely, it is. And, I have lots of wine floating around, and I often think I love spontaneous get-togethers. I'm not great about putting something in the diary and saying, "Yep, I'll commit to that." But I love someone being like, "I've got this open. Do you want to have a spritz, or let's make mimosas, or I've got some bubbles that And I just think that is, those moments where we catch each other off guard, or I often have, a quick beer with my neighbors in just sitting on the ground of the front of the garage, and it's like, it's connection for me. I may not be able to go out for dinner, or I've got to put the kid down, but for me, it's like that quick beer, that quick catch up means so much. So, there is lots of good things going on. I think we need to choose, a bit like whether we choose to turn on maths or we choose to turn on a documentary or something that's a bit more uplifting. We've got to make the choice to hear the stories that we want to hear, but also to provide some kind of positive uplift so that we can keep changing the narrative as we go along as well.
Yeah, and again, like to your point, like right, and because what we're talking about today is that there's a lot of challenge out there. However, there are really good positive signs that things are shifting and changing. That there are opportunities for Victorian wines to play a significant role within that. There is an engaged wine drinker. They're just looking at multiple drinks, which is fine. We've got good domestic consumption and all these other elements coming through it. So there are positive stories around it. So sometimes it's that reminder that we need to give ourselves that, sometimes in wine it becomes in this echo chamber of this narrative, this negative narrative that we have this self-fulfilling prophecy that, I've said in another podcast going, we've got to unsubscribe from the negative rhetoric, unsubscribe from that, whether it be a blog or a newsletter that reminds you of how hard everything is and how difficult it is, every single week. It's, or challenges that we face as a sector that are viewed through the lens of one particular story or narrative, or it's being this whole binary thing where it's like one thing or the other. It's not. It's that whole element of this factionalization, you could call it, of opinions sometimes in our wine sector. I find very frustrating because it's not that. It's more nuanced. Because you have everyday drinking wine, it shouldn't be at the exclusion of fine wine. It's everything in between. Music doesn't have that. Movies don't have that. Or even food. We have that. We have McDonald's, but we also have fine dining. Like the two can be coexist. It's all okay. But I think through all of those is that there's some. I mean, imagine if the wine was bad. Like, imagine if we were making awful wine.
We're making freaking sensational wine.
We're making sensational wine at the moment. And, I can't help but cheerlead and be positive, in particular where, I'm positive for the future of Victorian wine and or Australian wine, because I just have to look at the people who are coming up through the ranks of our community. I chat regularly with the Rootlings crew. Shout out to the Rootlings crew. There's under 35 networking program. Imagine that wasn't around when we were starting out. You've got the next crop program. We just ran that last year in Victoria. It's now sort of open to other regions. 25 unbelievably talented industry folk, and that was from Mornington, Gippsland, and Yarra Valley. watching them go through that program and their ideas and concepts, and that was incredible. And then you got future leaders, people who'd gone through Next Crop into future leaders, and then in Victoria we're developing a bursary for the company directors course, so to have another sort of step to sort of take that leadership role. So you're looking back and you're looking, okay, well, gee, wow, this is some amazing people who are coming up through the ranks. And sometimes when you sort of get to the top, you get this real negative rhetoric of this, oh no, everything's terrible. What? That's not leadership.
No, that's time to hang up your hat.
Yeah. And then Hayley Perbrick, she was our innovation sustainability lead. She's like Yoda sometimes. Like, she's just so zen and calm. And I have these conversations, and she manages to articulate things so much. It's like, that's what I was trying to say, but it sounds so much better when you say it. But she was talking about how, in terms of leadership, where people in these roles have to shift away from leadership roles into coaches. Where it's like, we need to make room. It's not about stepping aside; it's making room to pull people up, and to help, and to not to dismiss the experience, but to coach the next generation to come up through the ranks, because they're going to inherit all of the challenges and that have been done for our sector, but they're enthusiastic and they're motivated, and they're going to have a lived experience which is very different to ours, and they'll be representative of their wine community. So, look, I think there's challenge in our sector 100%, but there is so much positivity to celebrate and champion.
There sure is. And, you are a perfect example of someone like that. So when somebody comes knocking at your door soon, Dan, to tell you that they're taking your job, your reaction will probably be great.
Not a problem. And I think that's the thing. Again, at Revel, it was so great. Having Jess was time to step aside and let it. But I think it's also nurturing a culture of collaboration.
Definitely. And like you said, that's what a leader is. They're looking. Who's next? Who's up and coming? Who's going to let me retire early? This is what we should be doing. And I think you do that very, very well. Dan, I wanted to ask you something new towards the end of our conversation, rather than the 3 drinks, because I know what your 3 drinks are, because, well, you often buy them for me, but let's face it, I do know what your drink order would be. So now let's talk about if you had to make love to a wine, if you had to marry a wine, and if you had to kill off one, which is a particularly nasty question. So you can answer however you want. What would those 3 drinks be?
Oh my God, make love to a wine.
Yeah, it can be a varietal, it can be a wine.
It sounds strange, but I'll probably go, obviously, Pinot Noir.
Great.
Marry a wine?
Yeah. You got to wake up. You got to go to bed with that wine every day.
Oh, see, look, I'm a believer that marriage is a mistake we all have the right to make. So that's a real tough one, I think. If I say Pinot again, that's probably bad, isn't it? I mean, because you've got to marry.
I thought you might say rosé.
I mean, rosé, yeah. I mean, rosé is sort of like the everyday one, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a Pinot rosé. There we go.
You're never mad at rosé.
You can't drink rosé angry. Like, it's pink, for goodness sake. You can't, you can drink Scotch upset and angry, but you can't drink rosé upset. So maybe the rosé. A killer wine variety. Oh, man.
I know, it's mean because you don't really ever want to say that. So you could maybe.
No, it's sort of, I'd say let the market decide. But there's so many, right? We have a lot of great varieties. And if anything, I can't say one great variety.
I know. I thought it was too cruel
That's
to ask
hard.
You. So maybe we can say, how about we just say.
I'll offend somebody.
I know, and I don't want you to do that. How about we just say you have enough on your plate with 21 GIs in Victoria and not playing favourites, no doubt. So maybe we say we're just going to kill off subscribing to negativity when it comes to listening to good news stories, focusing on what we need to achieve, and celebrating wine.
Amen to that, Shanteh. 100%. Unsubscribe from the negative rhetoric.
I love it. Dan, it is such a pleasure. Always is. I always feel uplifted from when I chat to you. It doesn't matter what we're speaking about. I just feel like there's good in the world. There's good people doing good things, and you certainly are one of them. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for telling me a little bit more about what you're doing with Wine Vic. And yeah, thanks for spending some time with me.
Thanks so much, Shanteh. Really appreciate the time.
Cheers to you.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. Stay tuned for more stories from the world of wine and drinks. Listen in every Thursday on your podcast app. Follow us on Instagram at overaglasspod and contact us at overaglass@deepintheweeds.com.au.